And as I was growing up, I remember my mother telling me that if I learned one thing new every day and incorporate that into what I was doing, then I would grow up and be a better person. Today, we expect that you will be learning a lot of new things and that you will be incorporating them into your lifestyle, because this is our country. We have only one, and we cannot afford to lose it. As Ronald Reagan said, our leaders must remember that education does not begin with some isolated bureaucrat in Washington. It doesn't even begin with our state and local officials. Education begins in the home, where it is the parental right and responsibility. Our first guest that I would like to introduce is Don Brown. Don considers himself a country boy from Portland. He has served in the Walton County Commission as a Republican member of the Florida House of Representatives from 2000 until 2008. During his service in the Florida legislature, he was known for being well prepared and for standing his ground. He was most vocal when advocating for smaller government, less taxes, the free enterprise system, and market-based solutions. Widely regarded as one of the top orators in the House, Brown most recently served as a transition advisor to Governor Rick Scott on a regulatory, tort, and insurance reform issues. Don will discuss with us the intention and interpretation of the Constitution, and he will explore the basic principles of our Constitution and share the challenges and intents of our founding fathers. Let's give a big hand for Don.
Thank you so much. What an opportunity, and a timely opportunity to talk about something as important as the U.S. Constitution. Having watched the news last night, we're beginning to become aware that we've departed a little bit from the original intent of the Constitution. I want to talk about that a little bit, some basics, and then talk about the Constitution itself and some of the original intent. The members of the Constitutional Convention signed the United States Constitution on September the 17th, 1787, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Constitutional Convention actually convened in response to dissatisfaction with the Articles of Confederation and the need for a strong central government. After 4 months of secret meetings and debate and many compromises, the proposed Constitution was submitted to the states for their approval. Although the vote was close in some of those states, the Constitution was eventually ratified, and the new federal government came into existence in 1789. The Constitution, in essence, established the United States government as we know it today. But before we talk about a lot more about the Constitution and some of the more intricate things about it, let's spend just a few moments and talk about the preamble to the Constitution. The Constitution was written by several committees over the summer of 1787, but the committee most responsible for the final form, as we know it today, was something they called the Committee of Style and Arrangement. This committee was tasked with getting all of the articles and clauses that were agreed to by the convention and putting them into a logical order. On September the 10th, 1787, the Committee of Style set to work, and 2 days later, it presented the convention with the final draft. The members that served on that committee, the Committee of Style and Arrangement, were Alexander Hamilton, William Johnson, Rufus King, James Madison, and Gouverneur Morris. The actual text of the preamble and much of the rest of the final draft is usually attributed to the work of Gouverneur Morris. This newly minted document began with a preamble, the Constitution's reason for existence. It states in clear and concise terms the reason that it is necessary. It holds in its words the hopes and the dreams of the delegates of the convention, a justification for what they had done, in fact. In other words, its words are similar or familiar to us today, but because of time and context, the words are not always easy to follow. So let's spend just a few minutes and examine each sentence in the preamble and explain it for today's audience. It begins like this: "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." We, the people of the United States. It's important for us to recognize that the framers were an elite group, among the best and the brightest that America had to offer at that particular point in time. But they knew that they were going to try to forge a nation made up not of its elite, but of the common man. Without the approval of the common man, they feared that there would be a revolution. This first part of the preamble speaks to the common man. It puts into writing, as clear as day, the notion that the people were creating this Constitution. It was not handed down by a king. It was created by the people and for the people, in order to form a more perfect union. The framers were dissatisfied with the United States under the Articles of Confederation, but they felt that what they had was the best that they could have had up until that point in time. But they were striving for something better. The convention was actually called to amend the Articles of Confederation. It's interesting that when they got into the convention, they departed from that charge and developed something entirely new. The Articles of Confederation had been around, had been a grand experiment that had worked well up to that point, but now, less than 10 years into the experiment, cracks had began to show. The new United States, under this new Constitution, would be more perfect. Not perfect, but more perfect than the old. The next phrase in that preamble is to establish justice. I never will forget, I was in a meeting of young people 4 or 5 years ago, and I was talking about the judicial system in America. And one of them, bright young people, asked me, "What is justice?" And without giving it a lot of thought, I said, "Justice is when you get what you deserve, and I don't want any of it. I would much prefer grace to justice." Justice is important, but we should never lose sight of the importance of grace. Establish justice. Injustice, unfairness of laws in trade was a great concern of the people of 1787. People looked forward to a nation with a level playing field, where courts were established with uniformity, and where trade within and outside the borders of the country would be fair and unmolested. Today, we enjoy a system of justice that is one of the fairest in the world. It has not always been the case. Only through great struggle can we now say that every citizen has the opportunity for a fair trial and for equal treatment. But even today, there still exists discrimination. Our system is not perfect. We need to continue to guard it with our lives. But we still strive for justice, for that justice that the framers had in mind and wrote about. To ensure domestic tranquility. This is interesting, one tidbit of history. One of the events that caused the convention to be held was the revolt of Massachusetts farmers known as Shays' Rebellion. The taking up of arms by war veterans revolting against the state government was a shock to the framers and to the system. The keeping of peace was on everybody's mind, and the maintenance of tranquility at home was a prime concern. The framers hoped that the new powers given the federal government would prevent any such rebellion in the future. provide for the common defense. The truth of the matter is that this new nation was fearful of attack from all sides, and no one state was really capable of fending off an attack from land or sea by itself. With a weary eye on Britain and Spain, and an ever-watchful eye on Indian attacks, no one in the United States, no one state in the United States could go it alone. They needed each other to preserve and to survive in this harsh world of international politics in the 18th century. To promote the general welfare, a phrase that has been sorely abused and twisted and tortured in recent years, this is what they had in mind. This and the next part of the preamble are the culmination of everything that came before it. The whole point of having tranquility, justice, and defense was to promote the general welfare, to allow every state and every citizen of those states to benefit from what the government could provide. The framers looked forward to the expansion of land holdings, to the expansion of industry and investment, and they knew that a strong national government would be or could be the beginning of that. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Hand in hand with the general welfare, the framers of the Constitution looked forward to the blessings of liberty, something that they had all fought hard for just a decade before. They were very concerned that they were creating a nation that would resemble something of a paradise for liberty. This is the vision in their minds, as opposed to the tyranny of a monarchy, where citizens could look forward to being free, as opposed to looking out for the interest of a king. And more than for themselves, they wanted to be sure that the future generations of Americans could enjoy the same. And finally, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. This final phrase of the preamble is almost anticlimactic, but it is important for a few reasons. It finishes the "we the people" thought, saying what we the people are actually doing, and it gives us a name for the document, and it restates the name of the nation that's adopting the Constitution. That the Constitution is ordained reminds us of the higher power involved here, not just of a single person or of a king, but of the people themselves. That it is established reminds us that it replaces that which came before it, the United States under the Articles of Confederation, a point that's lost on most of us today, but quite relevant at the time. It's important to understand that the United States Constitution was intentionally and deliberately designed to be inefficient. And in that one respect, I guess we could all agree that they were very successful in that particular aspect of their endeavor, because everywhere we look today, we see inefficiency in government. But we should remember that they designed it in some respects to be deliberately inefficient. For instance, the separation of powers devised by the framers of the Constitution was designed to do one primary thing, and that was to prevent the majority from ruling with an iron fist. Based on their experience, the framers shied away from giving any branch of this new government too much power. The separation of powers provided a system of shared power, commonly referred to today as checks and balances. The three branches are created in the Constitution are these. The legislative is composed of the House and the Senate, and it's set up in Article 1 of the Constitution. The executive branch, composed of the President, the Vice President, and the departments, it's set up in Article 2 of the Constitution. The judicial branch, composed of the federal courts and the Supreme Court, is set up in Article 3. I find it very interesting to note in some of my research that the Supreme Court was the only division of the federal government that did not have a building of its own until late in the 1800s, and maybe even early in the 1900s. But if you've ever visited the Capitol of the United States, you probably gone into the basement, into the Capitol, and found the meeting place where the Supreme Court met. It's pretty clear from my research that the founders did not intend the Supreme Court to be necessarily an equal branch